The basics of financial education begins with this, with literacy, is it begins with an income statement and a balance sheet. This is the fundamental if you're going to be wealthy. And if you look over here, after mission, it's cash flow. This is basically accounting, CFOs, auditing departments. So as a young boy, that's when my rich dad started me on this. He says, if you can manage this, you'll always be a rich man, no matter what happens to you. Where people get mixed up is they call their house an asset. And he says that's the problem. They call their car an asset. Generally accepted accounting principles, I can actually count this suit as an asset. And that's what my rich dad said, that's where people get messed up. Most people think that savings is smart, but my rich dad told me years ago that savers are losers. Now I know this goes against the grain of what most people tell you, save money, save money, save money. But the reason savers are losers began back in 1971. One of the reasons we have so much economic volatility in our economy today, high gas prices, high food prices, stock market booms and busts, housing values going down, all can be attributed back to 1971. Plus there are other changes. So what makes the Rich Dad Company different is that we do not really subscribe to the idea of being a saver. We think it's more important you learn to be an investor. Like if you had invested in oil 10 years ago, you'd be a rich person today, even though savers are losers. If you invested in gold 10 years ago, you would have been a lot better off. If you had invested in rental real estate 10 years ago, you would have been way ahead of the savers. So if you want to get ahead, you need to not be a saver, but learn to be an entrepreneur or an investor. But to be successful in the world of business, there's three basic types of education you must have. One, academic education. That's reading, writing, arithmetic. I didn't do very well here. It's very important. I'm not saying it's not important, it's extremely important. Second is professional, where they become a doctor, a lawyer, secretary. In my case, I had two professions. My first profession was a sailor. I was a third mate on board oil tankers. Again, it was a good profession. And the second profession was as a pilot, and most of my friends went on to become airline pilots. I just didn't want to fly anymore. And the third is financial education. And what we'll be covering is this. As a young boy, I realized that I could beat my friends over here if I understood this. In other words, I can make a lot more money here than these guys here. The beauty of the world today is that, like when I went to work for Standard Oil of California, I got paid by the month. And if I was a pilot flying for the airlines, I got paid by the month. And when I worked on straight commissions with Xerox, I got, basically commissions. But I realized from my rich dad talking to me, that if I understood financially, I could make money 24/7 without working. That was the difference. So what you'll be learning about today is how we make money 24/7 without working. To me, that makes a lot more sense than working hard all the time. The basics of financial education begins with this, with literacy, is it begins with an income statement and a balance sheet. This is the fundamental if you're going to be wealthy. And if you look over here, after mission, it's cash flow. This is basically accounting, CFOs, auditing departments. So as a young boy, that's when my rich dad started me on this. He says, if you can manage this, you'll always be a rich man, no matter what happens to you. So this here is income, expense, asset, liability. Where people get mixed up is they call their house an asset. And he says that's the problem. They call their car an asset. By GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, I can actually count this suit as an asset. And that's what my rich dad said, that's where people get messed up, see. So this form is called an income statement. In America, this is called a balance sheet. There's a third form, it's called a statement of cash flow, okay? So when you look at this here is the real game board from my cash flow game. This is income, this income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow, okay? So the game is teaching you, as a kid's version, intermediate version, advanced version. It's teaching you while you're having fun. So very simply, my rich dad said, Assets put money in your pocket. So this is the cash flow pattern of an asset. It goes from the asset, it could be a house I rent out, okay, boom. So assets put money in your pocket whether you work or not. So what's the definition of an asset? Assets what? Put money in your pocket whether you work or not. One more time, assets what? Put money in your pocket whether you work or not. Now, I asked somebody, I was in Singapore, and I said, can you name an asset you have? This little Chinese woman raised her hand. She says, oh, yes, my husband. I'm sorry. I said, I'm talking about inanimate objects. She says, oh, he doesn't do anything anyway, you know. And so a liability takes money from your pocket. What's the definition of liability? Takes money from your pocket. So the reason people are afraid of losing their job is because they have liability they think are assets. So they have to keep going to work. Does that make sense, you guys here? So the other mistake that people make is that what they do is because they think their house is an asset, so they go and buy a big house because it appreciates, but what they have is a mortgage. And a mortgage stands for death, mort here, dead. It kills you. I'm not against mortgages. So they buy a big house, and especially here in Auckland, they have the big boat, you know. Then they have the BMW and the Lexus, you know, stuff like this. And so this is the cash. They have a job, money comes in, cash flows out. Okay. I call this financial diarrhea. I mean, they cannot stop. It flows out constantly, 24/7. Again, this is the real game sheet for the cash flow games. This is the piece de la resistance. The patent was awarded by the U.S. Patent Office basically on a financial statement, which I thought was pretty interesting, you know. But when I look at somebody's financials, people like E's and S's, employees and self-employed, they think this line here, salary, is the most important. That's not what my rich dad and I was taught me to look for. He wanted me to look at these lines here: interest, dividends, real estate businesses. It's this here that makes people rich, not this here. So the purpose of the cash flow board game was to train people to take this money coming in here, come down this way, and come back up here. That's it, okay? So there's 4 basic asset classes that make people rich. Number 1 is a business, and it's a business on this side. So you look at guys like Bill Gates, he founded Microsoft. Jobs created Apple. You know, Murdoch has broadcasting. So business is the number 1 asset. That's why I went to learn how to sell, because you have to learn how to sell to be good in business. Second is real estate. My wife in 1989 started out with 1 rental unit. Now she has 1,400. Ken has 10,000. My wife has 1,400, and we have 2 houses. We count them as liabilities. We have 1 house in Arizona, 1 house in Hawaii. So we call those liabilities. We don't call them assets. Third asset class is paper: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, unit trusts, stuff like that. Now, in Malaysia, I just want to warn you, when I talked about unit trusts or mutual funds, and I talked about real estate, we had realtors and financial planners leave the room. They were very upset with what I said. Not that I don't invest in unit trusts. I don't trust them. That's the reason. But we'll explain why later on. They're for a certain class of people, but it's probably the riskiest of all investments. Savings are included in here. And the third asset class are commodities. So me personally, I have gold. I took a gold mine public in China. I have a silver mine out of South America I took public. I have a copper mine now, an oil company, stuff like that. But I also hold physical gold, physical silver. Mike Maloney will come to explain why that's probably the best investment today is right here, because the dollar is crashing. All right. So please take a moment and every month, these things, whether I work or not, put money in my pocket. One of the problems of an S business is, in most cases, like a doctor, if they stop working, the income stops because they stop working. So these things here, 24/7, income's coming in. And that's what I was trained to do.